It's been an exciting time for Castlevania fans in the wake of its 30th anniversary a couple years ago. While Konami may have ignored the brand to some extent, it has lived on spiritually within the hearts of its successors. We have gotten a plethora of just superlative games from all corners of the spectrum, ranging from grimdark to colorful, but each of these, to me, hold a torch to reflect the series that inspired me.
Who are you?
First and foremost, I want to point out that the Castlevania animated series on Netflix is very much alive and supremely badass. Made by producer Artie Shankar, known for many other edgelord adaptations like The Punisher's Laundry Day and Power Rangers Unauthorized, featuring James Vanderbeek, as well as art director Sam Dietz with Powerhouse Animation in association with Frederator Studios, the people behind Fairly OddParents. It was in production hell since 2007 and finally got picked up by Netflix almost a decade later. You can see the influence of Hayao Kojima's work in its design, along with the obvious grit and tone that clearly makes it an Artie Shankar joint.
We can't fail.
But we're not here to talk about TV shows, we're here to talk about video games. First up on the docket of what I consider to be a proper successor is the 2D Soulsvania hybrid known as Salt and Sanctuary. Back in 2015, I went to the PlayStation Experience here in San Francisco, and I got to play the early demo, as well as meet some of the devs. They themselves told me off the bat that this is basically a 2D Dark Souls, which I thought was a funny thing to admit. But I guess to avoid the accusation of being derivative, they just say it up front. However, I think that's entirely too dismissive, as this game is a monster all itself. Mechanically and aesthetically, I think it's my favorite game on the PS4, like, hands down, all around. The immersive skill tree, along with the scripture-style lore that comes with each node of advancement, is pretty unique and dynamic to me. You can also multi-class, expand multiple job skills, and create hybrid builds if you want. For example, I have a pretty tanky strength build, but I put some salt towards intelligence so I can cast protective spells, as well as augment my weapon with arcane and holy magic. I main the Johnson Jet 7, which is basically this ridiculous OP giant pair of scissors, as well as dual-wielding the Phoenix Tail with a Pendragon Targe Shield for my other loadout. You know, for the record. The Dark Souls essence that lies within Salt and Sanctuary can be seen in many facets, including its world building. Its sprawling, decrepit setting based in this desolate island only leaves remnants and ruins of a lost civilization. The few remaining inhabitant NPCs say only vague suggestions of what had existed before, right? So these scraps of history paired with the tome scriptures of the skill tree can be patched together to create a quilt of lore. Or more of a jigsaw, I suppose, evoking a similar vibe to Dark Souls and how you uncover its ambiguous story. The 2D setting and gameplay, including the notorious platforming parts, not just the combat, all really remind me of Castlevania. The variety of ghouls and monsters are also akin to its bestiary. You can also acquire whips, as well as craft unique weapons like sword whips, which are kind of like the threaded cane in Bloodborne or Ivy's whip sword thing in Soul Calibur, as it extends like a chain whip and retracts and interlocks into a sword. Kind of like the Steel Centipede or Phoenix Tail. Super cool in my opinion. The more obvious connection to Dark Souls is the way they implement Salt as the soul substitute. Use it to level up and refine stuff, and you gotta grind and save it up between sanctuaries. And if you die, you lose it. Kaputs. Well, you get one chance to get it back, but then if you mess it up, it's gone. Goodbye. Hello, Cleric. Very Souls. A selfless cleric wastes his or her time to drag your beat-up corpse back to the nearest bird bath, and you get a second chance to reclaim your salt. Finding the next shrine and or sanctuary to dump your salt before you lose it can be anxiety-inducing, especially when you accidentally stumble upon bosses, many of which are unforgiving. Lots of soulsy roll dodging too, however the Metroidvanias were always dodge-based defense, so that's a thing. Salt also arguably offers a slightly more extensive palette of effective builds. You can actually carve out a beastly dex build in this game, as you can see my partner utilizing here as a roguish mage. The acrobatics, dodging potential, and fast attack DPS percentage makes dex just as viable as strength builds. You can also carve out some nasty OP glass cannon damage as a wisdom-based cleric alongside an intellect-based caster. Clerics can get this wicked holy scythe that just cuts open enemies with weaknesses to holy attacks like a hot katana through melted butter. They also get a floating sword summon that you can actually attack with after death, not to mention the coveted ability to actually resurrect your partner in crime. Tag teaming bosses and bolstering your friend's strengths while covering their weaknesses makes teamwork a genuinely crucial element, especially in New Game Plus. Definitely reflective of good party building and other team-based RPGs, as an alternate to running solo. Let's not forget one of the most spiritual successors, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, an 8-bit Retrovania tied to the upcoming Ritual of the Night. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is an 8-bit calling card to the early NES and arcade cabinet days of Castlevania, created by none other than Koji Igarashi, also known simply as Iga, the creator of the renowned Symphony of the Night as well as many other handheld Vania titles. Curse of the Moon is reflective of what's called Retrovania, meaning instead of the sprawling open world mechanics of the Metroid style, this has a more linear and stage-based approach. Curse of the Moon was part of the Bloodstained Ritual of the Night Kickstarter stretch goals, that of which was so successful that it spawned an 8-bit Retrovania to serve as the prequel to the anticipated main game. It has all the bits and pieces of some of the best NES platformers, including but not limited to some of my favorite Vania-esque bosses to date. I especially enjoy the little details of how its playstyle feeds the original Vania expectations, while also subverts it in clever ways to mislead you, in terms of modified enemy patterns or level placement. Other throwbacks I definitely appreciate are the retro NES HUD display along the top of the screen, with the notch-based health bar and the arcade-style visible score, along with the little graphics for the character portraits and sub-weapons. Regorged from the mouth of the Demon King himself, Koji Iga, Curse of the Moon just oozes nostalgia. I can't really finish this list without acknowledging the underdog hits. The one that IGN themselves called the new Castlevania. Of course, I'm talking about Dead Cells. A procedurally generated Roguevania action platformer with RPG elements, Dead Cells has you smashing around dungeons, cursed forest, haunted crypts, and the like, as you collect gold, weapons, blueprints, and cells while you dispatch a mosaic bestiary of enemies. You can upgrade 3 branches of stats: Brutality, Tactics, and Survival. Brutality usually focuses on heavy strike weapons, while Tactics seems to bolster more dex-based finesse weapons and projectiles. Survival, of course, boosts your HP. You start out as a hopeless fetid corpse, as one does, and you travel through procedurally generated isometric levels based on different environmental themes. It's another masterfully crafted, pixelated world housing unique and colorful characters. Dead Cells has a sense of humor amidst its grim death setting. Its illuminated color palette is also a great contrast to its darker tone. Most obvious aspect of this game is that separates it from the lot, is that it has a glorious return of permadeath. When you die, you're dead. No checkpoints, straight back to square one, level 1. One thing that does save, if you turn them in before you die, is the cells you collect from enemies. These are used to unlock weapons you've gotten the blueprints for, or boons to give you certain perks. The sheer extensive variety of weapons available in this game is a selling point for me, as well as the diverse nature of the weapon styles you can integrate. From giant fuck-off greatswords to snappy dex daggers or enchanted bows, even whips and shields. A lot of weapons and equipment roll with random stats every time they load out, and that adds to the procedural elements of each play being different. This game is unforgiving to say the least, but it has such a kinetic and responsive gameplay that once you're in the groove, the demand for a no-death, flawless playthrough feels attainable. Unlocking more abilities and better weapons that you can start off with, compiled with the personal in-real-life experience you gain from knowing how to dispatch all the different baddies, together makes later playthroughs even more fluid. I should mention that Dead Cells just dropped a free expansion, Rise of the Giant, that adds even more environments, bad guys, weapons, bosses, and even alternate endings for you to sink your teeth into. Worth checking out in my opinion, to say the least. And now, perhaps the most unsung of heroes, Death's Gambit. Produced by Adult Swim Games and crafted by White Rabbit Studios, this game wears on its sleeve the thought that was put into it. Similar to the 2D Souls formula, you start out by choosing a variety of character classes, ranging from soldier to assassin to mage, and even a unique slayer style that starts with a scythe. I started playing a swordsman with a buster sword as I usually do my first time around, but rolled another character to try out assassin, which I ended up finding really fun to play for once and perhaps one of my favorite dex iterations of any game. The combat and level design is clearly a harken to Dark Souls, with a mapless, sprawling, decrepit, interwoven world that connects back with hidden shortcuts and inaccessible areas that require you to return later.
Shame it's always
The voice acting is superlative in this game, featuring the likes of Allegra Clark, Carson Beck, and even Matt Mercer from Critical Role as Death and Zuma.
You're a survivor, are you not? Whence you came.
Not to mention that paired with the tastefully subtle music by Kyle Hendek. I think I pronounced that right. The stamina management and attack dodge timing is definitely in the vein of Souls, especially the parry mechanic. Enemy crowd control as well as pacing your engagement and retreat is important in staying alive. The way this game unfurls its enigmatic story is unique too. The premise is that you died as a soldier and were resurrected by Death himself to attempt to find the secret source of immortality. Yet again, you are an undead pawn that gets a second chance at living. Or unliving. One cool thing is after you die so many times, you randomly get teleported to a small desolate island under the sun. With bright colors and happy music playing, it's a random and almost unsettling peaceful oasis that you're just dropped into after death. You start running in either direction in the shallow water, and all of a sudden the sky turns black and the ocean water turns to blood. Then you instantly respawn back at the normal checkpoint. Not sure if it's supposed to be a dream sequence or what, but it's interesting nonetheless. Other times you will die and find yourself as a child again living in your old house, while conversing with your mother about her leaving you. Perhaps a flashback or hallucination, but it definitely piques interest into what happened in your past. The game eventually implies that your mother left to fight the war and died at some point, and one of your personal goals being undead is to find her. The focus on bosses really is the cornerstone to the Souls-Vania alike. Each boss is unique in its style and approach, and it takes dying quite a few times to learn their attack patterns and windows of vulnerability. One thing unique to Death's Gambit is that you can find up to 2 tomes per boss hidden within its respective area, and each grant 5% damage boost against the given boss. It's a cool perk that rewards your exploration and being attentive to its world. The abilities you can unlock for each weapon style is much more extensive than many games of its kin, and you could argue it's the ability roster of your choice that really adheres to the customizing gameplay style, not just the class. For example, the assassin class I play has a few cool abilities. One that's a standard double strike, another that freezes the opponent, and a third that's kind of like a teleport dagger that you throw and instantly spawns you wherever the dagger hits. Very useful in closing gaps between enemies, and especially bosses. All these special abilities require more than just stamina, but also this purple bar. The purple bar generates from attacking enemies and even getting hit, and it depletes quickly. Therefore, it requires you to get in a flow of attacks and dodges in before you can unload some dope AF skills.
It's too late for you.
Just look at the majesty of this pixel art. This is truly unprecedented. Well, it may have been preceded, but it's still really cool. I started this video last year around Halloween, and I never finished it. And since then, a whole slew of new games came out that I felt met the criteria of whatever this video is about. So I kept adding to it, and it got too long, and it's like a year late. So I'm cutting it off right here. Part 1, my thesis. Is Castlevania a genre? Now, how will I back up this theory? Only time will tell.